Welcome to a Legendarium special that will cover a brief history of Easter. In this installment, we will talk about the springtime celebrations held by pagan communities and how the early church may have transformed these revels into the holiday we know and love today. During the first millennium, Easter, rather than Christmas, ranked as the most important date in the Christian calendar. It celebrated the resurrection of Jesus Christ 3 days after his crucifixion. As early as the 2nd century AD, Christians are recorded as holding Easter celebrations. Easter is the climax of a 40-day period called Lent, which commemorates the 40 days that Christ spent in the wilderness before he began his ministry. While Easter, as we know it, was never a pagan festival, some of its traditions have roots in pagan belief. Many pagan religions had springtime celebrations to commemorate the ending of winter. These festivals often centered on the worship of nature or springtime gods and goddesses. Some of these celebrations included the coloring and eating of eggs. This was significant to the pagans of the time because they saw eggs as symbols of rebirth and rejuvenation after winter. Given the tendency of the early church to Christianize pagan rites, it is possible that Easter is a Christianized pagan celebration. For the early church, calculating the date of Easter was a frequent point of contention. Some Christians celebrated Easter on the same day that Jews celebrated Passover. Both Christians and Jews celebrated rebirth, with Passover observing the end of the Jews' enslavement in Egypt, and the Christians celebrated the resurrection of Christ. In 325 AD, Emperor Constantine convened the Council of Nicaea to standardize church practice across his empire. The council set Easter on the first Sunday after the first full moon that followed the vernal equinox. Nonetheless, it would take centuries for the church in Rome to impose its dating of Easter upon the rest of Europe. Going into the early Middle Ages, Christians marked Easter with a 3-day celebration that included Maundy Thursday, Good Friday, and Holy Saturday. Collectively, these 3 days were called the Triduum. They were marked by solemn services held in almost complete darkness. The parishioners would be denied the Eucharist for 3 days to commemorate the 3 days that Christ was entombed. On Easter Sunday, services began at dawn, with the congregation gathering outside the church to sing hymns. The priest then led them into the church, where he presided over a joyful service that commemorated Christ's resurrection. He then allowed the congregation to take the Eucharist again, and after the service, the congregants gathered for a vast and hearty lunch to celebrate the end of Lent, which is, of course, a time of fasting. Since eggs were forbidden during Lent, Christians boiled them to preserve them for their Easter feast. Many Christians, especially in Eastern Europe, painted the eggs red to symbolize the blood of Christ. Nobles sometimes decorated their eggs with gold leaf. In the days after Easter, young women would playfully capture men and only release them after they made a donation to the church. And that is the story of how a pagan holiday became a Christian celebration. That wraps things up for this installment of the Legendarium. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, press like. If you want to see more, press subscribe. And if you've got anything to say, let me know in the comments section. Thanks again for joining me, and I hope that you have a great rest of the day.